So we can skip into it.
Well, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get Alright, sorry. I won't say any more. I'll pass you up and chew on your face.
Thank you very much. Now, well, seeing as how we've had a rev up for the Recreational Boating Committee, I think we should give a rev up for the Vendor Services Committee. We worked so diligently and hard for you guys that we had our meeting last night in the ladies' changing room because we couldn't get into this building. So, you know, if you think we're never doing anything for you, we are constantly. So if you want to, you know, ever contribute to the Vendor Services Committee, feel absolutely free with any one of us to make suggestions or volunteer. Okay, Lou, we all love Lou, we all know Lou, she's a fabulous person and she's given up her Friday night to come and talk to us about flags. I actually embarrassingly had to confess that for all my years of sailing, I still really don't understand flags or rules as well as I should. So Lou's come along to help sort out some of these issues for us, and I know that there are other people in the room who know lots more than I do, and really almost as much as Lou, but maybe not everything. So now what can I say about Lou? I probably don't really need to say a whole lot. She's a race officer, she's an official, she's been involved in all sorts of regattas and important sailing events, and she will guide us down the right path when it comes to flags. This is it was to be a Parma chat, but now we're having a Korean chat. So it is a chat sort of environment. So feel free to put your hand up as we go along. You don't need to wait until the end. So let's have like a really chatty session. You know, if there's something you want to speak about or you want Lou to, you know, tell us more about, just put your hand up and let's talk. Okay, away you go, Lou.
Thank you very much. Can you guys give me a okay with that? You guys give me okay without that? Yes.
No, use the mic.
Yeah, you can use it?
Use the mic.
Alright then. Okay, well thank you very much for that warm welcome. It's lovely to be back. It's been a while. It's been some kind of world event going on for a couple of years that's prevented me from being here. So I want to talk about flags obviously tonight. That was kind of the brief, but I thought it would be interesting to cover a few more things related to race management so that you didn't just look at a whole bunch of colours and go, yeah, that's nice. And we can go through a few things about what race officers are thinking about most of the time and learn a little bit about that end of things if you haven't had a great deal of experience, which hopefully will help you sailing. I think we've got the general race management crew sitting around the corner hiding, so they'll be heckling from the back at some point. Statler Wall style, I'm sure. But that's good. I love that. So what I want to cover, just to start with, I guess, is that what our 3 aims of race management are. So 10 things that sailors think that are hopefully PG rated, and what race officers are thinking. Some rules for starts, some rules for finishes, and then we'll have any questions you've got at the end. And through that, I'm going to kind of cover what flags are relevant at those different times and what they mean. So basically the 3 things we're covering is we want the racing to be safe, fair and fun in that order, very importantly in that order. So the race officer is responsible for safety, as you probably all know. We have to look after sailors and we have to look after volunteers. It sounds a little bit scary, but it also means just influences the decisions that we make and how things go. It might involve where we set the course, you know, what kind of course we use, and even if we go out or not. Obviously then we're responsible for conducting a fair race because no one really wants to go home feeling like they've been gypped. And hopefully, for the 3rd thing, we're going to have some fun as well. That is the idea, after all, because it's pretty pointless if we don't have fun. And volunteers, as you know, won't come back if they don't have a good time. So, here are 10 things that sailors think and sometimes say to you. I think they're all relatively polite. We'll go through them in some order. Sometimes you get some questions like this, and that's totally fine. It's fine to ask your race officer stuff if you don't know what is going on or what their thought process is. We usually like to walk the boat park / bar at the end of the day and have a chat. And most people are pretty approachable. We do stuff up sometimes, probably breaking some kind of race officer code of conduct by saying that, but we do stuff up. So constructive feedback is always very much welcome. Alright, we'll go through these in some detail. So the first one is a really common one. You know, why are we starting the race? I'm bored / cold / hungry. Why are we stuffing around? That's a really common one. I pretty bad at picking up what's going on with the breeze exactly. But as a race officer, I find it much easier because I've got all this kit that can help me figure out what's going on and what shifts are happening. So when I'm looking at that information, I can tell what's going on. I've got a course boat at the other end, probably, of the course. We're running late courses to tell me what's going on. And I've got a heap of information coming in from sources like Bureau of Meteorology and Willy Weather and all the other things you might like to look at. So there's quite a bit of stuff that's going to happen before we start racing, and we're not going to try and keep you, hopefully, longer than we have to. But we want to have a fair course, as we've talked about, and good breeze across the course rather than just at the start line, because no point starting if we're just going to send you into the ether and you're going to sit there. It's going to be pretty dull. So the second one is, why is the arrow being so fussy about the start line? You might see them fiddling around the Lou end a lot. We really try hard to have a nice, square, unbiased start line if we possibly can. Some people like to have a bias at one end. That's not really the practice that I follow, and not one that's generally followed, but we try and make it pretty much 90 degrees to the average wind. And that makes it basically fair, and it gives a bit of a safety aspect as well, because if we've got all those piled up at one end because the lines are biased, it can be really very messy. Why are we racing when it's windy? This is what you get from little kids sometimes. They're like, I want to go out and break stuff. I'm like, well, it's not your stuff, is it? You didn't pay for it. So safety again is going to be a high priority. So out here, as you know, it gets pretty darn lumpy when it's from the southwest. So even if it's not the wind that's having trouble, it might be the waves, and so we might decide that it's not cool. Clearly here we've got some nice rules in the sailing instruction that say we're not going to race with scale warnings and all that kind of thing, which is handy. But we also need to make sure we've got enough rescue capacity on the water to keep everything safe, especially with dinghy racing. Volunteers can also be put at risk if it's really ugly, so we want to make sure they're safe too. If we've got no wind, well, that's the next question really, isn't it? Why aren't we hanging around out here when there's no wind? Hopefully, there's something coming. And again, I'm looking at those weather forecasts and hoping for the best. And we might be able to see things that are happening further away than perhaps you can when we work. And the idea is that we want to finish a race that we've started. We start a race and just send you into no wind, and that's pretty rubbish and makes people feel pretty sad. So we like to try and make sure that we've got some hope of getting a race in before we get going. And of course we want most people to finish, because as you guys know, I'm sure that you've been out there and might have been out there for hours and you don't make the time, and that's pretty upsetting. So we try not to let that happen. Alright. Own the top always flag, what the heck do they mean? Well, that's a good question. So the flags, as you probably know, are the main method of communication with sailors from the race committee. We can talk to you on the radio, but that's not really the official method. That's really just for helpfulness and for safety briefings and that sort of thing. Of course, dinghy sailors have to learn these pretty quickly, because otherwise they'd be terribly lost. Keelboat sailors get away with it because somebody on their boat probably knows what's going on, and then that means they don't have to. So it seems like there's a lot of flags, and we're going to have a look at them in a sec. Basically, there's a couple of rules that say, you know, we can't really give you a lot of information because there's big rule 41, which is outside help. So if we tell you something that not everybody else knows, that's kind of unfair. And if it's just because you didn't know, because you didn't look at the sailing instructions, that kind of thing, that's a bit frustrating for us. So it's nice if you can have a look at the sailing instructions, notice the race and know what's happening. Obviously with your regular racing it's a lot easier because you know what's going on, but for a special event of some sort, you know, range series if you don't do it very often, or something special, it's very good to have a read and ask questions if there's a briefing available to you as well. Alright, let's look at some flags. Oh boy. Okay. So it's quite a lot. They're basically the ones that get used, well, pretty much all of them. I mean, there's not too many more that you would use on a regular basis. Oh. It looks frightening. Do not yeah, just remember all this, right? It's a really good plan if you can. You can probably get this in sticker form, but at the very least get the A to Z and all the bits and pieces stick it on your boat, because then you can have a look and go, oh yeah, cool, I know what that is. So most of them have a pretty obvious job, thank goodness. And I'll just really go through them very quickly so that you understand. So the first row at the top there are red, white, stripy, where's Wally flags. Those ones are do this in a couple of ways, or 3 ways as it turns out. We can just